Welcome friend to this session of prototype pattern. Prototype pattern is basically one of the types of creational pattern. So what we'll do is in this session we will try to understand the definition of prototype patterns, and also we will look into a sample code and try to understand how we can implement prototype pattern. The first is the definition. As I said, they fall into the creational categories of the design patterns. Second thing is, basically prototype pattern is nothing but it gives us a way to create new objects from the existing instance of our object. Means what? Let's say that you have some kind of object which you want to clone, and then you want to do some kind of operation on that cloned object. But while doing the operation on the cloned object, you don't want to affect the main object or the original object. So you can say, this is basically nothing but cloning or xeroxing. Now you would be thinking, it's pretty easy. I mean to say, you just set one object to other object. But when you set one object to other object, it sets by ref. Means what? You can see in your screen, that basically I have created two objects, object 1 and object 2 of type class 1. So here's object 1 and here's object 2. Now what I do is I set some kind of data to object 1. I've just set some variable called as old value. And here's the simple set I do. I just set object 1 to object 2. Now by doing this, if you go and change object 2, it will also affect object 1. Why? Because it's when you set one object to other object, by default it is by ref. So if it is by ref, the pointer of object 1 and the pointer of object 2 basically point towards the same kind of data, or it points to the same copy of data. So any kind of operations you make on both of these objects, it will affect the same data, the same original data. So this concept is called as by ref. But when we talk about cloning, it is by val. Means what? I want it in such a way that if I change object 2, it should not go and change object 1. So that is cloning. Now let's see how we can achieve cloning. In .NET we can achieve cloning by using this .memberWise clone method. So you can see there is a customer class, and if I want to get the clone of it, I can just say this .memberWise clone and it will give me a clone of it. So now I create object of customer. Okay, I set some values, that is 001 old customer. I set some values to it. Now I create object 2 and I get a complete clone of object 1. Now if I go and change object 2, it does not affect my object 1. Why? Because now we are talking about a completely decoupled object, completely xeroxed object, actual Xerox copy of object 1, obj1. As I showed in C#, we have memberWise clone. In the same way in Java we have clone function. So any kind of language you use, there should be a facility of providing there should be a facility where they will provide some kind of default methods by which you can clone objects. If it is not provided, then you need to make your custom code, or you need to make an object completely in a custom manner. You need to make the Xerox object in a custom manner. There are two concepts when we think about prototype pattern. One is the shallow cloning and deep cloning. When you only clone the parent, then it is called a shallow cloning. Means what? Let's say that we have a customer object, and let's say that every customer object has a lot of addresses object, and a lot of addresses objects has a lot of phone. Now what has happened is, customer object will have a addresses object aggregated, and addresses object will have a phone object aggregated. Now if I clone the customer object, and if in that cloning process I don't clone the address and the phone, right, then this is called a shallow cloning. But if I clone the customer object, and if it also clones my addresses, phones, and whatever objects are there inside the customer object, that is called as deep cloning, or we can say a complete copy is cloned with all the member variable and etc, whatever it is. To achieve deep cloning, what has to be done is basically every object should have its own way of cloning, or it should actually expose the memberWise clone. Means what? You can see your example on the screen. I have a customer object, customer class, and this customer class has an addresses object. Now if I just clone this customer class and I don't clone the address, then that is called as shallow cloning. Okay, but now over here when I say get clone, the first thing what happens is it goes and clones himself, that is customer voice member clone. Then it also calls the address clone because we want to do deep cloning, and address clone has implemented his own member voice clone method. So in this way, every object implements his own cloning method, okay, and the parent class calls in a waterfall manner all the child classes cloning functions. So as soon as I say get clone, it will also go and call, first he will clone himself, okay, second he will also go and clone all its aggregated objects. We can also look into a sample source code of it. I have put in over here. So here's my customer class. You can get the sample source code in the DVD, and this is my customer class. You can see this is my addresses class, and this is a get clone method. This is a get clone method. So first it clones himself by calling his own member voice clone. Then he calls the addresses clone, and because addresses is already, the address object is already it has a facility of implementing its own clone, so you can see that he also gets cloned. So when we look at the client code now, it's a simple Windows form. So I put a simple test button. You can see over here is, I created customer obj1 object from CLS customer. I set some value to it. Now I create obj2 and I just say that please get me a clone from obj1. Now if I go and change obj2, it will not go and affect obj1. Why? Because it's a complete Xerox copy of it. And second, this is deep cloning. Why? Because when you say get clone to the customer, he also calls all the clone functions of the address. So in this way, every aggregated object takes care of implementing his own cloning functionality, and the parent class, or we can say the container class or container object, calls all its aggregated objects clone method, and thus leading to complete deep cloning of object. I hope that I was able to explain you prototype pattern, and if you have any doubts, if you have anything which you want to improve in the video, please mail me your suggestions, your doubts, your improvements to shiva_koirala@yahoo.com, and we will reply to it. Thanks. And you can also visit questpond.com. We have a lot of videos over there for design patterns, and I think almost all the videos are covered. If you just go through the video, you'll be able to understand at least the basics of design pattern, and also you can get the sample source code by which you can get more clarity in understanding the fundamentals.